Hi, I'm Melissa Donaldson, and welcome to Generation Flex. On today's episode, the table talk heats up as we examine identity and authentic self-expression in high-stakes settings. What obligations do people have to share their true identity, and what does it really mean to bring your authentic self? Let's talk about it. It's hard to read or hear anything about diversity, equity, and inclusion without having the term "bring your authentic self" hurled at you. Authenticity is akin to a fingerprint. Everybody has a unique version innate to themselves that identifies who they are without question. But do we really understand how authenticity manifests? And is it truly welcomed in the workplace or in any other setting? My guests are here to examine the anatomy of identity. Can you really bring your authentic self? Joining me today are baby boomer Jeanette Kelo Smith, a diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging executive. Generation X, Kimberly Swoboda, entrepreneur and executive coach. Also from Generation X, Claude Robinson, management consultant. And for the millennials, Will Southern, healthcare administrator. Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for being here. So let's jump right into this. So you can't fill out an application on anything, employment, school application, joining things, the census, without there being some series of boxes and the check all that apply. My question for you is that, do you think that's necessary in today's society? Do we need to be asking all these questions? Is this an outdated practice?
It's outdated.
It's outdated? Why do you say that, Will?
Well, for me, being in management, I think people look for particular pieces that, for instance, color. The name used to could tell you what a person's nationality or ethnic group is. Now, we changed the names. So now we look for, are they black or are they white or are they Hispanic to meet a diversified group, whereas we're looking at their actual attributes that they can bring to the organization.
I once had an interview where the man said, I just wanted to invite you in to see why is a person named Melissa Donaldson living on the west side of the city. He thought this was before the age of LinkedIn and being able to see pictures.
Right.
He thought I was Irish. Yeah. So can the name really tell you about the identity?
It can't. Because with my name, if I add my initial to the middle, Willie L. Southerns, to it, the same thing happens. And when I walk through the door, they're like, oh, yes, hi, I'm Willie. How can I help you?
Sometimes that can work for you.
They work for me.
I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. What do you think, Claude?
I would say they're outdated, and to look at why the structure was created in the first place. What was it meant to be inclusive, or was it created to be exclusive? And then my practice and what I've seen over the time in my career is it's meant to just check boxes and for companies to go, hey, we got one here, we got one here, we got one here, we're good inside. So I would say they're outdated and need to evolve into finding ways to find out who people really are. So HR in its origin, I think, was created in a way to keep people from being authentic in the first place.
Say more about that.
So HR practices are a system. It's a structure that's put in place supposedly to be a resource for staff, but in actuality, what I believe it is a resource for legal and executives and boards to protect a company. It's not there to help employees really bring their best selves to work. And if you look at inside of many companies or organizations, how many times do people say, I can't be myself because these structures and systems are in place to prevent that? It doesn't model it and it doesn't help authenticity actually manifest itself. So for me, I'm highly critical of any systems that prevent people from being who they really are.
Okay. Well, that could be a whole nother show, a whole nother day. You said a mouthful right there, but it's interesting. You believe we have to, go through this process, but it could really serve to hurt us, is what you're saying, because people are saying, yeah, I can check this box, but if I really showed up as that, as that aspect of my identity, there might be some issues.
I think that some HR departments are really trying to do the right thing. I think, like the genesis of employee resource groups, right, and things like that that comes out of HR, right, for most organizations. And I do think that they saw the gap, like you've called out, and I think they've also looked for ways to bring people together so that they do feel like they have peers, they have a place where they can be themselves, and a way to, I guess, connect them in the organization, right, in various groups.
And we're certainly not here to beat up on HR. Well,
No,
let's hope not.
I see, I'm looking at your face.
You want to jump in? Our DEI executive over here.
Thank you so much. So a couple things I want to respond to that you said. I don't think HR is a farce. But I also, so metrics don't lie. So I think it's important. I do think that, there are two questions. Whether you should be required to check boxes depends on what those boxes are, right? I do believe that it's important to understand what your representation looks like.
Yes.
Now, most times there's an opportunity for you to say, I choose not to provide, and that's okay. But if you're going to know if you have a truly diverse workforce, I do think it's important to be able to understand what that representation looks like as it relates to women, as it relates to women of color, as it relates to different ethnicities, GLBTQ plus. A lot of organizations are collecting that information as well, so that you can assess some things from a benefits perspective, from a how engaged when you do engagement surveys and things like that. Now, I don't think that information should be widely distributed, although I do think it's important to have an understanding of what your workforce does look like. When we talk about diversity and inclusion, yes, there is a level of inclusivity that you can't determine just from what someone's gender or ethnicity is, but it does help you to understand where you have some gaps and some opportunities to really build that within your organization.
It's complicated. I think is the real answer because the census also tracks this information and supposedly is supposed to identify where investments and improvements and these kinds of things. I think to your point, some of this information sometimes can be turned against the very group it's meant to help.
Yes.
Right?
And I was going to say, Melissa, so to your point about the census in particular, there are many, and that's not necessarily a corporation, but this is the government then going out to communities. And if you were to extrapolate the data to see who actually filled out the census, you would see that based on culture, that people of color tended not to, and especially in the Latinx community, not trust, once again, another system that's put in place that's supposedly going to help you. So that's where I'm coming from a community lens. People look at these type things with great skepticism.
Yes.
And skepticism is the great mask of the betrayed heart. And
that's
people,
a T-shirt. Say it again. Skepticism
is the great mask of the betrayed heart.
is the great mask of the betrayed
And many
heart.
people in communities look at it, and it's the same thing maybe in hospital settings. They have to look at how they are being treated. And if you're not from a dominant culture, once again, another system, and they're like, not sure I'm taking this test right here because no matter what they say, do they really care about me?
Well, let's just be honest here. I know you mentioned the Latino community.
Yes.
But for those of us from the African American and the Black community, we're not too far ahead or behind on that. Being in a leadership role in healthcare, I can tell you right off the bat that patients they feel, based off of their insurance, based off of their demographics, where they live, whether or not they're going to get the best care, depending on the hospital they go to, depending upon the community center that's attached to their local neighborhood. So it's just not pertaining to particular groups such as Black, Latino. It's the same as for the LGBTQIA community. Very mindful of where we go and where we want to get the certain treatment. So again, going back to the HR piece, I agree with you when you state that they're checking certain boxes, but also from a recruitment perspective, if you check Black or Latino or Chinese or Asian, whatever, if you check those boxes and we have enough of those, then I'm now moved to the side so you can find a group that you don't have versus having a great talent, regardless of what color or creed that they are. So from an HR, I knew your answer was going to be political and great. I knew that, but from a
Yeah, he's saying that, the statistics don't lie. To your point,
Well, they can be
we know
skewed,
who's there
though.
and we know who's not there.
It can be the data can be a little skewed a little bit depending upon what you're looking for. So for instance, if you're doing a study, they have criteria for studies. It's not a mass group. I need you to be 25 or under. I need you to be a woman. I need you to be this. So the data can be skewed just a little bit. But if you had wide data, regardless of what it is, then you may have a better outcome on it. So I'm just saying, from an HR perspective, I'm just saying.
Well, I think it's important also to realize that it can also be helpful in identifying where you could look at the data and say, I don't have any African Americans in this job or at this level.
Or in this research.
Or right, exactly.
You can find
And
that
that
out.
would be very helpful in any of those situations. And I think when you look at, am I hiring African Americans? Am I hiring women? And if you're looking at that data and you see that you're not, it gives you an opportunity to say, okay, what do I need to be doing differently to source that talent from a recruiting perspective? How are you recruiting folks? If you're recruiting folks from the same place and you're getting non-diverse talent, then maybe you need to expand that to say, where do I now need to go to attract that talent? Because we know that the world in terms of representation of ethnicity is changing, and there'll be more brown people in the workplace.
So what I hear you all saying is there is a place for it.
Absolutely.
But we need to be responsible of what we do with what we're asking for from people, right? And not betray folks. If I tell you who I am, what are you going to do?
reassure
That
them.
information
Yes.
and reassure them. Okay. So we're going to put a pin in it for now.
All right.
And we will be right back.
I am Dr. Obari Cartman, inviting you to join us for the premiere edition of Brothers Talking, a monthly program that will bring a cross-generational group of Black men creating a safe and brave space for honest, fearless discussion about the issues and challenges and fears faced by Black men. The brothers and I look forward to seeing you on Thursday, August 10th at 7 o'clock p.m. exclusively on CAN TV 19, streaming on cantv.org and the CAN TV Plus app.
Welcome back. Now that we've gotten a bit clearer about the implied meaning of authentic self, let's turn to the reality of what that notion really is. So we ended the last segment talking about how information is used. And Kim, you wanted to share something here.
Yeah, I was
a
just
thought.
thinking about back to what you were saying, Claude. I feel like the questions that get asked, I think they're very outdated. I think there needs to be a new version of it. And I have a daughter who is adopted daughter. She's multiracial. She's Caucasian, African American, and Native American. I can't even represent that on most of the questionnaires that get asked. And does it matter? Where am I that you even need to necessarily know all of that? Right. And again, that's not really telling, you don't know her any better as a result of me checking those boxes.
Yes.
So it goes back to the point, I don't know if I should say that portion on here, but I'll say it anyway. Raven Simone, when she stated that I'm not Black, African American, I'm American. And I think that's something that we should move toward in America, with just saying, I'm American. I was born here in the United States of America. It doesn't matter how dark or how light or how white I am. What matters is whether or not I can do the job. What my pedigree doesn't matter. What matters the most is, does the paper checks out? You know, my references, will that check out? Those are the things we should be looking at.
I'm going to say I beg to differ.
I'm sure.
Because, you know, Claude used the term human resources. How about if we thought about human capital? And the individuals that we are depending upon to do all this great work and what have you. I kind of want to know if there's an expertise or a background or a perspective that you're bringing to the table that we don't really have, right? And so with your daughter, there's a lot of perspectives that are running through her veins, right? So what would she say, or, you know, what would you think showing up authentically, what does that look like for her?
Well, I think she just wants to be seen as her. She doesn't want to be seen as someone who's, you know, brown or white or whatever, right? Like she just wants to be seen as her, and she wants people to get to know her versus judging her based on appearance or something else. They want her to she wants them to take the time to get to know her.
That's the interesting question about identity, is what is it really, not just what it means, what are the implications, right? We're all a collection of something, That's right. You know, and we'd all like to have and enjoy the freedoms of being able to move around and do the kind of work that I want to do and these kinds of things. And when we start saying things like, I don't see color, for example, I think that just completely strips folks
That's not
of
authentic.
50% of what they say, or of who they are, rather, 50% of who they are, and you said that they're not authentic. Say more about that.
One of the things that I'm always looking for with a last name of Kilo, there's questions that come with that. What's her ethnicity? Is a Black woman going to show up? And I've shown up and people say, oh, I didn't think right. I didn't think she was Black. And then then the questions of, is it short for something? And exactly, you're already
you'll see.
Yeah, and so obviously I am an African American woman, but you do get that question sometimes. So what does that mean? Who what's your heritage? And I'm like, I'm African American, but people do want to probe that. So I can understand what you're saying about your daughter in terms of she just wants people to get to know her. I want you to get to know me. Forget about what my name is. So,
right.
My only point around it is that I think that culture is oftentimes overlooked. Skin tone is superficial, symbolic, even though it's beauty in all of it. But culture, I think, means so much more. If people talk about the culture of an organization, imagine the cultures that we all come from, and then to be able to learn and celebrate, understand the richness of culture. And if you really watch, you can see how culture has been passed on for centuries. And the problem is if a company does not understand that, and then they try and minimize culture to fit into whatever it is they believe should be, then that's problematic for me. And oftentimes I think when people are trying to be themselves inside of an organization or a company, the company does not want that if it doesn't fit into this mold right here. And it's so funny because people talk about authenticity. They want authentic Mexican food. People who like
soul
sports
food.
want authentic soul food, or you want this authentic year, people in hip hop, I got this.
Yes.
But, and it's a value in that. Companies should do the same thing, and see authenticity can add so much to a culture or a climate that benefits people.
Let's talk about the implications, though, right? Because I think you're right. There should be space for, how do I need to show up authentically? Is there a fine line where it's too much? Is there a fine line of it's inappropriate? Like, it's evolving, right? So let's talk about identity versus expression, which I think is what you're getting at as well. Go ahead.
So being a person from the South whose last name is Southerns, the culture and the upbringing is totally different. And one of the things that I always have to be mindful
from
of,
Chicago, the North?
in the
Okay.
North,
Yep.
or one of the things I always have to be mindful of that is a thorn in my flesh now is tone. Where I come from, say what you mean what you say, and you don't have to raise your voice. You can just say, move, and that's it. And now, being a leader, the first thing my staff said is, your tone. What tone? Are you mad about the tone? But there's nothing wrong with my tone. But the
that box
organization
you were talking about.
from that box, but from an HR perspective is, well, let's see how your tone is. Speak to me. But then it becomes more. But
No,
then
they didn't.
Yes, they did.
I'm not his HR person.
It's like my first lady, Lorraine and
But then it becomes more of a, to the point of you put it in a box. So yes, I have to put my Mississippi Southern disposition in a box to show up as the leader, to speak, to make sure that my diction is where it's supposed to be, make sure the staff feel neutral and all that. I can't show up and say, no, don't do that, leave that alone, because it becomes more of a, oh my goodness, I feel attacked. So no, I can't be my authentic self at work. I have to, quote unquote, be on or act like, all right, team, let's get this together.
So one might call that code switching.
That is definitely code switching.
So how does that show up? Is it everybody, we all know what code switching is. Okay.
that definitely
What's
shows
the
up.
experience here?
So the experience for me, I don't know about for the others, but the experience for me I fit in well with my lighter counterparts, but I don't fit in quite well with my darker counterparts. And the reason being is because as African American people of color, we know what code switch looks like. Whereas with whites or Caucasian, I guess is the way I should say it, I'm sure, whichever one, it looks more as you're polished. That's another word that we like to use, polished. So because I'm polished, now I belong at this table. But then to African American, no, he think he better than us. So yes, I have to do a good bit
It's
of code
complicated.
switching.
It's complicated.
It's very complicated. Yeah, it's very complicated. Yes.
We're with the culture, but it can be complicated.
No, I
We
agree.
gotta think on you now.
Yeah, I know. I'm
Yeah,
with
go
you.
ahead, Jeanette.
I do think, we've all code switched.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We've all code switched.
On the regular.
On a regular.
On the regular.
And, can you bring a deep level of authenticity to every situation? No.
Right.
I don't know that you necessarily want to, because you don't know how people are going to receive that. You don't know, and it's
what's on the
unfortunate.
other end
Exactly,
of that
and what the outcome of their receiving that information is going to be. I think yes, times are changing in that regard. We're asking people to be more authentic, but I don't know if the environments are conducive to that authenticity, and I think that's where the challenge is.
Well, and that's kind of what Claude was saying right at the very beginning, is that, right, where our organizations aren't always set up to support
That's right.
us bringing our true, full, authentic self to work.
That's right.
So the true question I would ask
Yeah.
is,
You trying to take my job?
no ma'am, no ma'am, who gets to be authentic?
Good question.
Who gets to be authentic?
To your point, the notion of professionalism is subjective. So I've been in countless, I call it a blessing to be able to have swam in corporate, government, nonprofit, and then on the street for real. And to
There it
see
is.
and to see people being a fraud, and that's not who they really are, but they line themselves up around because of self-preservation. So professionalism, whoever can play the role or the character of a professional, that's who gets to do it. But there's a real cost to that, for people. They know deep inside that they're incongruent to who they really are.
And everybody loses. in that
Exactly.
scenario, right?
Yes.
As leaders, I feel like, so I do like a lot of leadership development. I feel like it's our responsibility to help people unlock their authenticity
Yes.
so that they can be in integrity and they can bring their best self to whatever situation, whatever environment. And that's, I work really hard on that with my clients because I feel like that when we are our true self, that is when we're most powerful.
Would agree.
Because you're not dealing with that internal conflict.
Right.
Yeah.
Of being one person at home and another person
Yeah.
in the office or wherever you work.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting. Absolutely. It takes a lot of energy to do that.
And it's not even about race
No,
and
no,
ethnicity.
no,
like,
it's not.
It's
you know,
gender.
right.
The comfort.
Yeah, I've been told, just put your head down. Things are gonna be all right and
Yeah.
everything. And then
Yeah.
I didn't listen. It was like, man, please, no, it ain't
Yeah.
going on like that.
Yeah.
So
This is such a complicated conversation, and unfortunately, we are out of time.
Oh wow.
Oh my.
But I think we put a lot on the table here that it is important. We need to know who's in and who's not in terms of who are we working with, right? We need to make sure that human resources manages the human capital appropriately and sets up the structures that allows people to work in our integrity and flourish.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
we have sometimes as a strategy when we need to code switch. That's a whole different show, a whole different day as well. But we'll be right back.
I am Dr. Obari Cartman, inviting you to join us for the premiere edition of Brothers Talking, a monthly program that will bring a cross-generational group of Black men creating a safe and brave space for honest, fearless discussion about the issues and challenges and fears faced by Black men. The brothers and I look forward to seeing you on Thursday, August 10th at 7 o'clock p.m. exclusively on CAN TV 19, streaming on cantv.org and the CAN TV Plus app.
Authenticity is an extremely personal thing, like one's fingerprint, uniquely yours. Identity is often the root of that authenticity, often precariously. Many people are understandably protective of how they define and present self-expression. Unfortunately, the term authentic self often gets tossed around like the fallen leaves of autumn, becoming yet another tired trope. Sounds good, but it gets lost in translation. Identities vary, but often acquiesce to dominant cultural norms in order to be accepted to a point. Hyper-conscious awareness for the underrepresented, oblivious to the majority. Ready or not, identity is complicated and authentic self-expression continues to evolve. What matters most is self-love, doing your best, and being the very best version of your beautiful self. I'd like to thank my guests, Jeanette, Kim, Claude, and Will, for a great conversation. Until next time, remember to live, laugh, and love